Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a relationship that is shaped and continues to profoundly impact the Middle East, that between Iran and Israel. You might think you know this story, right? I mean, the headlines constantly scream about escalating tensions, proxy wars.
Yeah, it's all over the news.
Exactly. But what if we told you the roots of this relationship are far more ancient and maybe surprisingly intertwined than you might imagine?
Well, what our sources reveal is really how history, ancient scripture, and, modern geopolitics intricately weave together. It creates this dynamic that often defies simple black and white explanations. So our mission today is really to unpack these layers. We're going from, believe it or not, surprising historical alliances right up to modern missile exchanges, trying to understand the critical turning points and the underlying currents.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're going to trace this through scripture, the rise of nationalism, those economic pressures, and the modern-day shadow of warfare, both, covert and overt.
Let's unpack this surprising history. Okay, so our deep dive takes us way, way back, all the way to the Hebrew Bible and what our sources reveal about this early relationship. Well, it's truly unexpected, almost counterintuitive given today's tensions. Specifically, if you look at the Book of Ezra, we discovered a really surprising alliance. The Persian king, Cyrus the Great, he's depicted liberating the Jewish people from Babylonian captivity.
Right, from Babylon.
And not only that, he actually funded the rebuilding of the Second Temple in Jerusalem. I mean, think about the historical irony for a moment. An ancient Iranian king was instrumental in making the Temple Mount possible.
It's a really striking detail, isn't it? Cyrus is even referred to as a messiah in the Hebrew Bible.
Yeah. And he was Zoroastrian, yet he showed this remarkable respect for the monotheism of the Jews. This creates such a powerful historical irony. The very nation that today's Iranian regime calls for Israel's destruction was once a key ally and benefactor to the Jewish people. This then leads us to think about, well, how does this ancient positive connection square with later religious texts?
Good question.
The Quran, for example, it doesn't mention Israel as a modern political state. However, it frequently refers to the children of Israel, or Israelites, often as a kind of historical cautionary tale for Muslims, warning against repeating perceived arrogance or disobedience.
So this scriptural ambivalence, as our sources pointed out, it sort of gave rise to a foundational philosophical wedge.
Yeah, wedge.
While Judaism is intrinsically tied to a specific land, seen as a divine deed, Islam, in contrast, spread through empire. Palestine became more of a religious symbol for Islam than a specific divinely granted territory. That's a really crucial distinction, and it shapes perceptions even today.
Absolutely. A very different relationship to the land itself.
Now let's fast forward quite a few centuries. I mean, a lot of centuries.
Right.
All the way to the 20th century.
Right. Modern times.
Before that seismic shift of 1979, Iran and Israel actually shared, a strategic alliance. Our sources confirm that under the Shah, Iran officially recognized Israel back in the 1950s.
It's hard to imagine now.
It really is. They were actively sharing intelligence, particularly because both were wary of Nasser's pan-Arabism. That was a shared concern.
A common threat, perceived at least.
And get this, it's truly a head-spinner, isn't it?
Right.
Thinking of Mossad, Israel's famous intelligence agency, and Savak, the Shah's formidable secret police, trading together.
Trading together, yeah.
It's almost impossible to reconcile with today's headlines. And there was even a secret pipeline, flowing oil from Iran directly to Israel.
The complete reversal that happens in 1979 is just profound. The Islamic Revolution transforms Iran from a monarchy into a theocracy, a state governed by religious law. And this wasn't just a change in government, it was a fundamental ideological pivot. It redefined Iran's whole global stance and, crucially, its relationship with Israel.
Total 180.
Totally. Khomeini, the, charismatic leader of the revolution, he famously declared Israel to be the little Satan and America the great Satan. This wasn't merely a diplomatic break, it was an outright declaration of ideological war. It immediately shifted the entire regional dynamic.
So how did Israel respond? I mean, their former ally suddenly becomes this major adversary.
Well, they reacted.
They leaned even more heavily into U.S. support, which was already there, but it intensified. And they began an accelerated program of settlement expansion. Both nations, the sources highlight this, underwent a kind of radicalization. Their policies, their rhetoric, it all became much more extreme.
A hardening on both sides.
Yeah. And from that point on, Iran starts actively backing groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, funneling support, resources.
The proxy strategy.
Right. And simultaneously, Israel forges even deeper strategic ties with the U.S. and starts initiating preemptive strikes in places like Syria, trying to counter these perceived threats. This aggressive tit-for-tat really set the stage for the modern conflict we see, moving from that covert alliance to open, albeit often indirect, adversaries.
The shadow war begins in earnest.
Okay, so we've explored the historical roots, the ideological shifts, but what about the material realities? Because beyond the battle for hearts and minds, you've got economic pressures and that chilling shadow of nuclear ambitions casting an equally long, ominous shadow. Let's maybe start by looking at the money.
Yeah, follow the money.
Iran's economy. It's been severely impacted, really strangled by U.S. sanctions, especially after the JCPOA, that international nuclear agreement, collapsed back in 2018. Inflation just soared, creating immense internal pressure.
Huge pressure.
Yet despite these economic woes, Tehran continues to fund various proxy groups. Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, Iraqi militias.
So the question is, where does that money come from, right? Iran's economy is clearly under immense pressure from these sanctions, yet they keep funding these groups.
Yeah.
Well, based on our sources, a lot of it still comes from oil exports, but increasingly it's flowing through these really sophisticated covert trade networks.
Oh, okay.
These involve countries like China and Venezuela, and they utilize illicit banking channels, basically finding ways around the international restrictions.
Geeky.
Meanwhile, Israel presents a sparkly, contrasting economic picture. It's emerged as a tech superpower, leading in cyber defense, artificial intelligence, even critical desalination technology.
To Silicon Wadi.
Exactly.
Yeah.
However, it's also noted as the most militarized country in the world per capita, which, speaks volumes about its ongoing security concerns and the perceived need for strong defense in a very volatile region.
And then there's the nuclear question. This is maybe the most existential threat looming over this whole dynamic, isn't it?
It hangs over everything.
Israel's undeclared nuclear arsenal. And it's an open secret, right? A deterrent that's long been assumed.
Assumed, yes. Never confirmed.
Right. While Iran insists its nuclear ambitions are purely peaceful for civilian energy, Israel views any significant Iranian enrichment, any progress toward nuclear capability, as an absolute existential threat, something necessitating strong action.
A red line for Israel.
And this inherent distrust, it spawned this chilling dance of covert sabotage, a kind of shadow terrorism, as our sources call it. So instead of direct declared warfare, we see things like cyber attacks. Remember Stuxnet targeting Iran's nuclear facility?
Oh yeah, Stuxnet was huge.
Or strikes on their key figures, key sites like Natanz and Isfahan. The insight here, I think, is how this constant indirect escalation defines the conflict. It ensures this perpetual unease where miscalculation is a constant terrifying threat.
Always on the edge.
So all these pressures, historical, ideological, economic, they really reached a boiling point with recent events. Our sources point clearly to October 7th, 2023. Hamas launches its most aggressive attack in decades on Israel.
Unprecedented.
Leading to Israel's unprecedented and forceful response in Gaza.
Right.
Now, following this, Iran claimed, publicly at least, to offer only moral support to Hamas. However, the evidence, according to sources we looked at, strongly suggests substantial logistical backing. It indicates a deeper, more active role than just cheering from the sidelines.
More than just words. This then led to a rapid and, frankly, dangerous escalation. Israel began striking deep into Syria, targeting Iranian assets, commanders, resulting in the killing of Iranian Quds Force generals.
Big targets.
Very big targets. And then for the first time in history, in April 2024, Iran directly launched missiles and drones at Israel from its own territory.
That was a major step.
Huge. This direct exchange effectively began the regional war everyone had feared, as our sources describe it. The shadow war broke into the open. But what's truly critical here, and often gets overshadowed by the direct conflict, is that both Iran and Israel are grappling with these profound internal fissures.
Right. Things aren't exactly stable at home for either of them.
Not at all. In Iran, you have widespread protests continuing to rage, not just over women's rights like the mandatory hijab, but also broader demands for economic opportunity, political freedom. It's a deep challenge to the regime's legitimacy. And in Israel, you have fundamental questions about the very nature of its democracy being raised. Unprecedented social division, especially under Netanyahu's controversial judicial reforms, which sparked massive, sustained protests, huge societal rifts. These internal struggles, they undoubtedly influence and are influenced by their external actions and posturing.
That's a really key point. So what does this all mean for their future? Both nations claim some form of, divine legitimacy for their actions,
Yeah.
even for their very existence.
Yeah, invoking higher power.
Yet, simultaneously, they're described as fractured, deeply ideological, and, frankly, anxious. The sources compellingly argue that war in this context, it's become almost ritualistic.
Ritualistic, how so?
Sacred, symbolic, and cyclical. Almost like a preordained conflict they can't escape.
Yeah.
It's a powerful and deeply unsettling idea to consider.
Like they're trapped in a script.
Exactly. So where does this leave us, the listener, after this deep dive? We've seen two nations seemingly trapped in these grand eschatological narratives, stories of ultimate destiny, final battles,
End times thinking.
fighting proxy wars that, as our sources suggest, really mask much deeper, more existential fears, fears of collapse, betrayal, the loss of their fundamental identity.
And zooming out, it becomes pretty clear that this conflict isn't just about land anymore, or even just nuclear weapons, though those are obviously huge factors.
Sorry.
It seems fundamentally about who owns the future religiously, technologically, politically. The cycle, the sources imply, is likely to continue until one side, or maybe both, abandons what they call the myth of total victory. The idea that one side can completely vanquish the other.
That's a heavy thought. This whole deep dive, it leaves you with something profound to mull over, doesn't it? Long after this conversation ends. Our sources highlight two ancient wisdoms that just speak so directly to this dynamic. The Talmud says, those who pick up the sword die by it.
A stark warning. And the Quran offers this parallel warning echoing through time. Whoever kills a soul, it is as if he had slain mankind entirely.
Wow, powerful words for a really complex, constantly unfolding reality. We hope this deep dive has given you a clearer, maybe more nuanced understanding of this critical relationship. Keep seeking knowledge, everyone, and keep asking those deeper questions.